he led a TED Talk regarding violence in Boston that got over 1 million views. But that talk was about how he was an integral part of reducing violence in Boston by 79% in the 90s. That's a huge hello. Aren't you curious to know how he did that? Are you curious? I mean, if you're not, we can just shut it down and we can just go home. Like, I want a Philly cheesesteak, so I can just go out and just roam the streets. It's nice outside. Are you curious? Are you excited? All right, let's give Reverend Jeffrey Brown a great round of applause as he comes up. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. No. Do I keep this? Huh? Again, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Before I start, let me ask a question. Where can I get a good Philly cheesesteak? All right. So I assume there are going to be a lot of good places I can go, right? All right. So I'm a Baptist preacher, and I need as much time as I can get in order to tell the story. But let me just tell you my story, and I'll answer any questions that you have. If you would have approached me at the very beginning of all of that and said that you were going to be a part of a crime reduction strategy that would see a 79% reduction of violent crime in a city over an 8-year period, I'd have looked into your cup to see what you were actually drinking. I didn't start off trying to be a part of anybody's crime reduction strategy. I had just graduated from seminary. I started pastoring a church in the area. I was 25 years old. And if you would have asked me what my ambition was, I would have said, I want to be a mega church pastor. Y'all know what that is? I wanted a 15, 20,000 member church. I wanted my own television ministry. I wanted my own clothing line, all that kind of stuff that those guys had. But after about a year of pastoring, my membership went up about 20 members. So, mega churchdom was way down the road, right? But seriously, if you would have said, what's your ambition? I would have said, I just want to be a good pastor, want to be with people through all the passages of life, birth of children, going to school, want to be with all the families through every crisis. When someone goes to the hospital, to go visit them and pray with them. And when the matriarchs and patriarchs pass on, to gather the family together to remember a life well lived, to preach messages that would touch lives, and to also represent the community as a leader. And that's what I was doing. And I thought that was my job. And then something started happening in my community that caught my attention and the attention of many others. And that was the homicide rate started to rise precipitously. And there were young people who were killing each other for reasons that I thought were very trivial reasons, like stepping on someone's sneaker in a high school hallway. And then after school, that person would get shot. Or someone standing at the wrong street corner with the wrong color shirt on at the wrong time, and then they would get shot because of that. Or two young men vying for the attentions of a young woman. She chooses one, and then the one that she doesn't choose shoots the one that she did choose. And I was perplexed as to how to deal with that issue. And so I looked at the resources that I had. I had this church. I had this community leadership. I had this ability to build programs. And so I started to preach decrying the violence in the community, started to build programs in my church for at-risk youth. And I thought that if other clergy would do that and other churches and other communities would do that, then somehow we would stem the tide of violence. The problem was that it didn't work, that the violence started to spiral out of control. And it started to change the character of the city. You can go to any housing project like the one down the street from my church, and you'd walk in there, and it would be like a ghost town because parents wouldn't let their kids come out and play, even in the summertime. And you'd listen in the neighborhoods on any given night, and to the untrained ear, it sounded like fireworks, but it was gunfire every single night in the communities. And you could go to any emergency room at any hospital on any given night and look in there, and you'd see on gurneys shot and dying young men, usually young black men, young Latino men. And I was doing funerals, but not just of those venerated matriarchs and patriarchs, who've lived a long life and you've got a lot to say. But I was doing funerals of 18-year-olds and 17-year-olds and 16-year-olds and a 14-year-old. I've done over 1,000 funerals in the city of Boston that were gang-related in some way or another. And I realized that in the midst of all of that, whatever I was doing wasn't working, and I had to figure something out. And so I looked at the sermons that I was preaching, and I started to preach harder, decrying the violence in the community. And I even tried to be innovative. I even tried to preach a rap sermon one time. It didn't work, but at least I tried, right? I'll never forget when I finished that sermon and everybody was leaving the church, and a young man waited till everybody was out. And he walks up to me and he was like, "Rap sermon, Rev, huh?" And I said, "Yeah, man, what you think about that?" He said, "Don't do that again, Rev." I said, "Don't do that again." But I preached and tried to build other kinds of programs. Everybody was trying to look for a solution. And then something happened that changed everything for me. It's a young man by the name of Jesse McKee. He was walking home with his friend Rigoberto Carrion. And they were walking to the housing project that was right down the street from my church. And they met up with a group of youth that we later identified as members of the Vamp Hill Kings, which was a Dorchester-based group. Dorchester is a section of Boston. And they were in the project because they knew friends, but everybody knew Jesse because he had an after-school job at a radio station, so he was a pretty popular kid. The day before, he had bought a brand new leather jacket. And they started to ask him about the jacket. Where'd you buy it? How much did it cost? What kind of leather? And then they tried to steal the jacket from him. He refused, struggle ensued, and they killed him and his friend Rigoberto simply because he was a witness. They tell me that as Jesse was running towards up the street, mortally wounded, he was running towards my church, and he died some 150 yards away. If he would have gotten to the church, it wouldn't have made a difference because the lights were out. Nobody was home. And I took that as a sign. A few days later, they caught some of these youth who had done this deed, and to my shock and surprise, they were around my age at that time. But the gulf that was between us was vast. It was like we were in two completely different worlds. And I wrestled with these images in my mind of this young man in desperate need of help, but church wouldn't have been there to help him. And these young men who were part of my generation who were doing these things, and I did not understand the world that they were in. And as I was contemplating all of that, a funny paradox started to emerge. And the paradox for me was this. In all of the sermons that I preached, including that rap sermon, by the way, I was also preaching about building community. And I suddenly realized that the community that I was building was missing a certain segment of the community. And if I really wanted that community, I needed to reach out to them, which meant not to deal with those who were on the fence to violence, but to deal with those who were actually involved in the violence, the gang bangers, the drug dealers, those. And as soon as I came to that realization, a question came in my mind, which was, why me? Why should I do this? Soon as that question came, the answer came just as quickly. Why me? Because I'm the one who can't sleep at night thinking about it. Because I'm the one looking around saying somebody needs to do something about it, and I'm starting to realize that someone is me. And isn't that how movements start anyway? They don't start with a grand convention and everybody coming into agreement and then walking out of the place in lockstep. But it comes when just a few get together with a burning commitment, or maybe just one. And it started with me like that. I realized that the answer didn't lie within the four walls of the sanctuary of my church, that I needed to come out of the four walls of the sanctuary and meet the youth where they were. And so I started to volunteer at the high school just to try to get a sense of what to do. And it didn't take me long to realize that the youth that I really needed to reach, they weren't going to high school anymore. And then I started to walk around in the community, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that they weren't out during the day. And so I started to walk the streets at night, late at night, making connections, trying to build relationships. And there was some other clergy who were doing the same kind of thing, and an incident occurred that brought us all together. And although some ministers were talking about, programming and money and raising funds, what we were saying to these same clergy was that, we need to get out of the four walls of our sanctuaries. We need to get into the streets. There's a whole world that we don't understand, that if we're going to try to figure something out, we got to be there to figure it out. It wasn't everybody. It was only about 12 or 13 of us. But we all got together in the most violent neighborhood in the city, and we started walking. Now, when we first started walking out there, not a lot of people started talking to us. I mean, we were quite the anomaly, right? I mean, we weren't the police, we weren't drug dealers, we weren't drug customers. Some of us had collars on, so they were like, what in the world is all of this? But after a while, they started to approach us. They started to approach us because we kept coming out there. We kept being consistent in our behavior. We didn't let the excitement and all the hype of what happened, in terms of the violence, deter us from trying to find that answer. And then we were not out there to exploit them. There was a lot of people who were saying, we need to take back the streets. But every time they would go out into the streets, they always had a camera with them or a reporter. And they would enhance their own reputation to the detriment of those who were out there. And then when they realized that we were not doing that, they started to talk to us. And what I wanted to talk to you about this morning is what I discovered in that process. And it's so important for you to understand, as you look at the challenges that you face in this century, that the challenge that I had for me was to listen and not preach to those who are out on the street. Now, look, that's a little difficult for a Baptist minister, I want you to understand. But amen. Somebody say amen to that, But that's exactly what we did. We said we don't know our own neighborhoods after 9 p.m. at night, between 9 p.m. and 5 a.m. But you do. You all are the experts of understanding this terrain. So talk to us. Help us to see what we're not seeing. Help us to understand what we're not understanding. And we got this amazing education about what was happening out on the streets. The next thing that I discovered about this whole process is that some of the most inventive, some of the most creative, some of the most intelligent people that I know are out on the street, engaged in the struggle. And they had a perspective on what was happening out there that I did not have because of where I was. And our perspective and their perspective combined sort of helped us to build a platform for a program that we called the 10-Point Program. And then we built a coalition around that, and we called it the 10-Point Coalition. And we started to work together with the youth on the streets. And we started to work together with other sectors of the city, with the schools and with the principals and with the city itself, city government, with law enforcement, with all the folks who were out there affecting what was happening on the streets. And that added perspective in that collaboration, taking seriously the community as a partner, was the thing that made the difference. Now, you heard that we were part of a process that had a 79% reduction in violent crime in an 8-year period. But the number that you did not hear was that we had a 29-month period in which we had 0 juvenile homicides. Now, I leave that for you because the big secret of what happened did not lie in the adults. Now, it was important for the adults to be able to come together and check their egos at the door and to see something that was bigger than the sum of its parts. But the most important thing that a lot of people miss as they research the stuff that we've done in Boston is that the young people themselves made a decision that it was no longer cool to keep shooting and sniping at one another, that it was cool to be peaceful, that it was cool to be anti-violent, and to stand together and say we want to end the era of violence in our community. And that's my challenge to you today, to make the impossible possible, to change the culture of violence by leading a movement to make nonviolence cool, especially for those who live in the most violent neighborhoods. I know it's possible. When I go and talk to folks in the school, they'll talk about, the categories of people in the school. You're either an athlete, or you're a gangster, or you're a nerd, or whatever the other categories they have in there. There needs to be another category in there, the category of the people who are standing together, who believe that it is possible to end the era and the dominance of violence in their community. I've been in a community where that has happened. It is still happening in the city of Boston. I've traveled to cities all across this country and around the world, and movements have been gathered together by young people who commit themselves and say, listen, if nobody else does it, we will do it ourselves. You can do this today in the city of Philadelphia. And I'm hoping that next year, when we're able to come together again, and next year, when we come together again, people will look at this moment today, when you all decided together that we're going to end the era of violence, as the start of the great movement around this country of young people trying to change this country and change the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, I'll take up my offering now. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Question?
Hello, I'm Janice Carter from Prairie Charter School. I'm in 10th grade. And my question is, why do you think young males in violent neighborhoods resort to violence to handle with situations?
Yeah, I think the reasons are a variety of reasons. I think it's a mistake when people think that it's one reason and one reason only. So you do have, like E-Dog posting up on the block trying to defend it. But you also have people who are out there and they carry weapons and they're not intending to necessarily shoot anybody, but they're out there with the piece for defensive purposes. Sometimes there are things that are happening in the background of their lives, with their families, that sort of makes violence a normal part of who they are. But I've never seen anybody that's out on the street who had the intention, from the very beginning of their lives, to be a gang member and or to be a drug dealer. And because it's a fast life, it's a quick life. Most of the folks who are out on the street know that. And so, although, you have folks who have their variety of reasons to commit acts of violence, I've seen some of the most violent young people turn their lives around. And so it's possible. Where are you? Back in the back?
My name is Alyssa Farmer from Philadelphia Performing Arts, and my question is, I believe that lately there has been violence in school environments over ridiculous reasons. So how do you think, as a person with experience, how can we end this?
Right, did you say violence in school departments?
Yeah.
And in schools?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I think the real creativity lies within you to think about what's possible. What I think is possible may not be good for what you're doing here in Philadelphia. You all know your situation, you know your schools, you know the ebb and the flow of what's happening. I think there needs to be more time given to students to really think carefully about, what we can do. A lot of the times the violence occurs over simple disputes that have a very quick and violent resolution. So, if there are not just peer counseling programs, but peer intervention programs, that are created where some of these disputes can be resolved, within the school before you go out, after school. There are a lot of things that you can do, but the power lies within you to figure it out. Yeah. All right.
My name is Gerald Witters.
Hey, Gerald.
I attend Gateway to College. I'm a sophomore.
I was wondering if you thought that whether education plays a huge role in whether people are violent or if they are in a gang, and if you think if we could reach out to those who are no longer attending a school, and if we could educate them and get them a legitimate education, do you think that would improve the community and the violent community, do you think?
So the question, because it was hard for you to hear, the question was you're trying to get guys who are no longer in school back into school?
Do you think that would help a lot?
And get helped along?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. In Boston, for guys who dropped out of school and got involved in life and decided that wasn't for them anymore, we've had alternative, they have alternative high school programs, but within some of the high schools, they had, in essence, what I would call reentry programs in which they would come in and would have supports around them. It's possible to do. Sometimes there are issues that involve folks dropping out. Their reading level or the skill levels are not, up to grade level. There could be learning disabilities that are there. There could be a whole host of social issues, that you have to handle. But a lot of times when I'm working with guys on the street and they're of high school age, one of the things that I encourage them to do is to go back to high school or to get their GED equivalent so that we can move them into the workplace so that they can be productive.
My name is Omar. I attend St. Kofa. I'm a junior. The question that I have is, being a Baptist preacher, do you see yourself working with other religions to help your cause, especially because the leaders of our country are promoting religious hate?
Absolutely. We do it already. We can't do it by ourselves, and the politics of division hurts everybody.
My name is Mark. I'm from George Washington High School.
Hey, Mark.
First and foremost, I would like to thank you and say that your presentation was very moving. But my question is, because Philadelphia has a high reputation for drug trafficking and a lot of violence is stemmed from the drugs and money that surrounds that, what would be your advice for a good first step in combating that problem?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that I get asked often is, what would the first step be, right? A lot of times it's from leaders who want that solution, quickly. I always remind folks it's taken us a long time to get into the situation in the first place. And so the solution is not going to be quick, and an effective thing within months. And when you think about years of failed housing policies and chronic underemployment as well as unemployment, when you think about poor health care and, schools and, the difficulties around getting, schools up to speed for everyone to succeed, and then you throw in drugs and you throw in guns, this cultural phenomenon of violence has emerged. You have to understand this culture in order to address the culture. And you can't do it from an armchair. You can't do it, from inside the four walls of the church. You got to get out there. You got to put your feet where your theology lies, as I tell preachers, and to build relationships and to get an understanding and a perspective that you can't get in a book. And that's always, for me, the first step. And then when we talk about solutions, you do that in relationship with the folks that you talk with. So what would be possible and solvable for Philadelphia may not be possible and solvable for Boston, but you're able to do it in Philly because you're talking to the players in Philly.
My name's Shadia, and I'm a junior at Port Wilson High School. And I wanted to ask you, people that have anger management and have decisions to do violent things, do they have a second thought of coming to you before they do that decision?
Yeah, I've had people who who've done that on any number of occasions. When people understand that there is a reliable resource for them to embrace, they'll utilize it. We used to do something in Boston called a season of peace, and we would call for a ceasefire of all the gangs between Thanksgiving and New Year's Day. And, I would get calls from guys who would be like, I see dude right now, they'd be in the car. I see dude right now, and what you gonna tell me to stop me from not doing them right now? And so they called me because they wanted me to talk to them, right? And so as a result of, having those conversations and with some of the guys maybe having prayer, we could get them around that piece. But when you talk about anger management, you're talking about some deeper issues that are going on there. And so I have folks who are counselors who, I can refer, some of these young men to so that they can have some deeper conversation. They still have me as a resource, because they may trust me more than the person I'm referring them to. But you've got to deal with that. And if you think about our communities, trauma as an issue is really community-wide. And so we've got to figure out some way as a collective city to really begin to deal with community trauma so that we can get at some of those anger issues that you're talking about.
Hi, thank you. My name is Paige Rucker from One Bright Way Community High School. And I just had the question, how do you keep yourself safe from going out and being involved in the community and everything that's going on? And how do you expect us, or what advice do you have for us for going out and being safe while trying to help the community?
Right. People ask me that all the time, because when I go to cities and I train clergy, one of the things I say to them is that I want you to take me out on your streets at night. And for a lot of them, they're like, out there right now? And I'm like, yeah, out there tonight. And then we go out there, because one of the myths that people have out there is that, it's a shoot on sight thing if they don't know who you are. If they see you as help, and if you're out there to help and try to help the community, nobody's going to shoot you. I've been doing this now for over 28 years. And in the past 2 years, I've been to over 23 cities. And so I've been, walking the streets of Detroit at night. I've been in East Oakland, at 11 o'clock midnight. I've been in Las Vegas. I've been in New Orleans and Baton Rouge. I've been in Norristown and Camden, New Jersey, at night. And so when you go out there and when people see you as being helped, it's not a thing where they're going to shoot you on sight. Now, there are some things that you have to learn in order to keep yourself safe. And so we train and we talk about those things. But the main thing is that you have to decide, if you're going to be out there, why you're going to be out there, and how do you posture and position yourself so that you can be a part of the solution rather than part of the problem.
We have time for 3 more questions. Three more questions.
Okay, 3.
Hi, my name is Edlira. I'm from Northeast High School.
Hi.
So my dad is a Muslim and my mom is a Christian. So I lived for 16 years in a country where my people taught me to love both cultures in the same way. So I'm a Christian and I've never been to church, and I'm a Muslim and I've never been to a mosque. But when I came here, I realized that things are different, and both religions have a difference between them. So my question is, do you think there will always be a difference between those two religions that will cause violence?
Yeah. My vision is that one day we're going to be able to come together, not just in this country, but all across the world. I think now, at least, in recent memory, I have seen, Christian pastors and Muslim clerics, coming together and talking very seriously about how we can lift up our communities. In Boston, we have, a very large mosque that's right in the heart of the African American community, and we have I believe it's a Sunni mosque, and the Nation of Islam is in another section of the city, and so we oftentimes talk together, learn about each other, because there's just so much that we don't know. but the key is in the relationships we build. If we don't come out of our inhibitions and be able to connect with one another as human beings, then we're not going to get anywhere in this country. And because I talk to some of my Muslim cleric friends, and they are my friends, we can be friends and still be of different religions. We have to figure this thing out. And honestly, the future is yours. You all are my future. And so my hope is that as things begin to move forward, that movement and groundswell of people coming together, regardless of whatever differences there are, would be possible and be a part of the American way of life.
Hi, my name is Gianna. I'm from Philadelphia Girls High.
Hi.
My question is, living in Philadelphia, I think we all noticed that there is a fair majority of violence in our city. And I wanted to know, during your time in Boston, did you find anything in relation to the violence in Boston, to them being in relation to them coming from low-class communities?
Mm-hmm.
Was there any relation with the violence in Boston?
Yeah, I mean, you'll find a lot of the violence is in, the parts of the city where you do have, in some cases, generational poverty and disadvantage. There's always very high unemployment rates. But I have to say, violence is a malaise that affects all communities in some way or another. I know that, some of the most violent gangs in our city came from young people who actually had two-parent families and lived in houses, in a sector of the city. And so with all of that advantage, you wonder why, they would engage in this kind of work. I think violence is one of those things that, we have to stop looking at as, that's relegated to the inner cities and into the, generally poor areas in the city. I think violence is a part of the American malaise. And I think we have to end the dominance of violence in our cities and in our communities. So it's more than just stopping guys from shooting one another, but we have to think more deeply about how we treat one another, in everyday life. And once we start improving that, and my hope is that once you all start engaging in the movement of doing that, then we'll have a better country.
Well, this is the last question, and just a housekeeping announcement. If we can keep our voices to a minimum, even if you're a spectator, it's a little distracting for us to really be able to receive the information. So I appreciate you setting the environment for us to really be able to receive our speakers. Thank you so much.
Okay, one more.
Hello, my name is Tyler. I'm a junior in Parkway Northwest High School.
All right.
As young Black African American men, our egos sometimes cloud our judgment to make some real irrational judgments out there, especially in the streets of Philadelphia. In my opinion, I think that our egos is like this because we come, especially in Philadelphia, some young children come from broken families and don't have, the right role models for them to lead to the right way. My question for you, Reverend, is why do you think, as young Black African American men, we have such bad notions for ourselves as young men to go towards violence? And what can we do to change our egos and make it better for ourselves?
Yeah. I think that you're absolutely right. We have this conundrum of young men coming from the situations that they're in and finding themselves engaged in violence. But there are role models. There are people who can connect with some of these young people and help to turn their lives around. And there are a lot of programs that are being developed for that. But I think what's really important is for someone like you to be able to stand up as a young Black man and to be able to embrace the values that makes you who you are. because as I see each and every one of you are strong, all of you are powerful, and although there are times in which you can, make wrong decisions, at your core, you have values. You all are leaders. And so our hope is that as leaders, you will help lead the way. And you'd be surprised how many people, they'll look at older adults, like myself, and we're able to connect with them. But there's also that kind of peer-to-peer strength, to be able to get in a crowd, that doesn't engage in drugs, or to get in a crowd that doesn't deal drugs or want to shoot somebody, building those kinds of things. It's my hope that you can find a way in which you can build those kinds of environments within your school so that people can see it as attractive, see it as cool. Only you can do that. I'm a little beyond cool right now. You look at my gray hair, right? I mean, I'm okay, but I'm not that cool, all right? But you all can figure this thing out, and I need for you to do that. I believe you can do that. I know we can end this era of violence, not only in my lifetime, but within your purview. And so my hope and my prayer is that you will do that. Thank you all very much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Are you all motivated? Are you pumped up? How inspirational was that? Absolutely amazing. So take 5 minutes amongst yourselves to talk about this challenge. After the 5 minutes, I'm going to manage everyone's expectations. If we can please make sure we stay in our seats. Stay in your seats. After the 5 minutes, we're going to have an inspirational speaker that you don't want to miss. And then from there, we will release you. Then from there, we will release you by table for lunch. I know we're all inching to eat. I smell the chicken. It smells really good. I'm hungry too. We just have a little bit more to go, so can you all bear with me? Call or response. Can you bear with me or no? Yes. You know what? This is my side. All right. Now, 5 minutes, and then I'll come back and introduce our inspirational speaker.